I stayed silent as my wife silenced me with her empowerment rules, until my disappearance exposed her empire of control and shattered her illusions. The change wasn't sudden. Like most relationship shifts, it happened gradually, then all at once. We'd been married for 4 years when she started attending these women's empowerment meetings every Thursday evening. Initially, I supported her. Everyone needs their space and interests, right? 6 weeks into these meetings, I noticed the first red flag. We were discussing renovating our kitchen, something we planned for months. I suggested a layout that would make cooking more efficient, a reasonable idea since I prepared most of our meals. "That's just your male perspective," she interrupted with a dismissive wave. "The kitchen should flow according to feminine energy, whatever that meant." I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phrase she'd picked up. Then came the living room redecoration. I came home from work to find our comfortable sectional gone, replaced by stylish but impractical furniture that looked straight from a magazine but felt like sitting on concrete. When I mentioned this, her response sent a chill down my spine. "We're implementing a new house rule: no male opinions on our living space." She wasn't joking. Her tone was dead serious, her eyes challenging me to object. "That's ridiculous," I said. "I live here too. My comfort matters." "This is exactly the male entitlement my group discusses," she replied. "Men have dominated decision-making for centuries. It's time for women's voices to be heard." I took a deep breath. "There's a difference between equality and silencing me completely," she scoffed. "You wouldn't understand. Your privilege blinds you." Over the next few weeks, the no male opinions rule expanded beyond decor. My input on weekend plans? Not welcome. Thoughts on dinner choices? Irrelevant. Even my preference for the thermostat setting was dismissed as mansplaining temperature. The breaking point came during a casual conversation about current events. I mentioned an article I'd read, and she actually held up her hand in a stop gesture. "I've created a safe space here, and that means not having to hear male perspectives on societal issues." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're banning me from expressing any thoughts in my own home." "Not banning," she corrected with a condescending smile. "Just prioritizing female voices. You can still talk about sports or whatever." That night, lying beside this stranger who used to be my partner, I realized something profound had shifted. This wasn't about furniture or kitchen layouts. My wife had decided my thoughts, opinions, and feelings were inherently less valuable because of my gender. The woman beside me had once valued my perspective, sought my advice, and treated me as an equal. Now she viewed me through a distorted lens, reducing me to nothing but my gender, the very definition of prejudice she claimed to fight against. I turned away, facing the wall, and made my first independent decision in months. This situation couldn't continue. I wouldn't rage or plead. A man who's not respected doesn't beg for respect. He commands it or walks away. And I was starting to see which option remained. What she didn't realize yet was that while she could silence my opinions, she couldn't control my actions. And sometimes actions speak louder than any words ever could. The no male opinions rule quickly infected every aspect of our lives. What began as decoration decisions morphed into financial dictatorship. Despite contributing 80% of our household income, I suddenly had no say in how our money was spent. "I've scheduled us for couples photos next weekend," she announced one evening while scrolling through her phone. The photographer she'd chosen charged nearly $2,000 for a session. "That's outside our budget this month," I pointed out. "We agreed to build our emergency fund first." Her head snapped up. "Are you seriously mansplaining finances to me? The rule applies to money decisions too. I've already paid the deposit." I leaned forward. "With what money?" "Our joint account, obviously." Her tone suggested I was being intentionally dense. "You mean the account I mainly fund? That's not a no male opinion zone. That's called financial abuse." Her face flushed. "Don't be dramatic. It's just photos. It's just the principle," I countered. "Partnership means joint decisions on major expenses." "Your outdated concept of partnership is exactly the problem," she snapped. "You're trying to control me through financial manipulation." The irony was staggering. I walked away rather than escalate further, but silently transferred half our savings to a private account that night. Call it insurance against future female-empowered spending sprees. Our social life suffered next. Friends we both enjoyed for years became unwelcome in our home because the husbands were too opinionated. My weekly basketball game with colleagues was suddenly problematic because it was reinforcing patriarchal bonding rituals. When I objected, she launched into a rehearsed speech about how my social connections were perpetuating systems of male dominance. The script felt borrowed, words that weren't hers but repeated with religious conviction. One evening, she invited 2 women from her Thursday group for dinner. Throughout the meal, they spoke over me, exchanged knowing glances when I contributed anything, and openly discussed how their husband's education was progressing. He still thinks his opinion on politics matters. One woman laughed while the other nodded sympathetically. My wife beamed. We're working on that here too, but he's learning. I wasn't learning. I was observing and calculating. Later that night, I attempted one last rational conversation. This dynamic isn't healthy. We need to rethink this rule. Mutual respect means... Here we go, she interrupted with an eye roll. Another lecture about respect from someone whose gender has disrespected women for millennia. I'm not my gender. I'm your husband, an individual who deserves basic respect. Your fragile male ego is showing, she smirked, clearly parroting phrases from her group. Maybe you need to examine why equality feels like oppression to you. This isn't equality, it's role reversal. You've become exactly what you claim to hate, controlling, dismissive, and prejudiced. She stormed out, slamming our bedroom door. I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, mentally cataloging the transformation of our relationship. We'd gone from equals to dictator and subject, from partners to adversaries. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened, but something had crystallized within me during those silent night hours. I wouldn't beg for respect in my own home. I wouldn't argue against an ideology that had consumed her rational thinking. Instead, I'd plan, strategize, and execute a response that would finally make her understand the consequence of silencing a man who deserved to be heard. The final straw came on a Saturday evening that had been carefully orchestrated to humiliate me. My wife invited her entire empowerment group, 8 women who swept into our home with the collective energy of a tribunal rather than dinner guests. I'd spent the afternoon grilling for this event at my wife's insistence. You can at least make yourself useful in the background, she'd said. So, I did, preparing a meal I wouldn't be allowed to fully participate in. The dinner conversation revolved exclusively around how disappointing men were, husbands who failed to understand emotional labor, boyfriends who expected gratitude for basic decency, ex-partners vilified for crimes as grievous as taking up too much space. Each story was met with emphatic agreement and elaborate theories about male inadequacy. I remained silent, serving food and refilling drinks, not from submissiveness but strategic observation. I was gathering intelligence about the group that had radicalized my wife against me. The conversation shifted to summer plans. My wife announced we were spending 3 weeks in Europe, something we had never discussed. That sounds expensive, I commented neutrally. When did we decide this? The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me with expressions ranging from shock to disdain. I decided it, my wife replied coldly. We don't need your permission. It's not about permission, I clarified. It's about joint planning for a trip I'm apparently funding. One of her friends, their unofficial leader, cleared her throat. This right here is exactly what we talked about, men controlling through financial leverage. Another chimed in. Classic patriarchal tactic. My wife's eyes narrowed. I think you should give us some privacy for the rest of our dinner. Your opinion isn't required here. The request was clear. Leave my own dining room where I prepared the food they were eating because my gender disqualified me from the conversation. In that crystalline moment, something shifted permanently, not with anger, but with absolute clarity. I nodded once, placed my napkin beside my plate, and walked upstairs without another word. From our bedroom window, I could hear their laughter resume, louder now that the male presence had been removed. I opened my laptop and began researching divorce attorneys in our area, filtering for those specializing in cases involving financial abuse. The next morning, my wife acted victorious, as if my retreat had been some kind of surrender. The girls thought you were so dramatic last night, she commented while scrolling through her phone, but they were impressed I enforced the boundary. Interesting perspective, I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. Kicking someone out of their own dinner table counts as a victory in your world. Our world is changing, she corrected. Men need to get comfortable with discomfort. I sipped my coffee. And what exactly is the end goal of all this discomfort? Dismantling patriarchal entitlement, obviously, she said, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a child by creating new entitlement, just with a different beneficiary. Her expression hardened. "You clearly don't get it. And honestly, I'm tired of trying to educate you." "That's fair," I conceded with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. "Not everyone is suited to be an educator." She missed my point entirely, taking it as submission rather than the dismissal it was. The relief on her face confirmed everything. She didn't want a partner. She wanted compliance. That afternoon, I made my first call to a lawyer while she was at yoga. The second call was to my bank. The third was to a real estate agent about short-term rentals in the area. My wife had succeeded in silencing my opinions at home, but she'd failed to notice I was quietly planning actions that would speak volumes. The next 3 weeks became a master class in strategic preparation. While maintaining a facade of resigned acceptance, I methodically reclaimed control of my life behind the scenes. My lawyer, a sharp woman who'd seen countless cases like mine from both genders, laid out a clear roadmap. "Document everything," she advised during our confidential consultation. "Date, time, witnesses, exact words. Pattern evidence matters in court." I created a secure digital journal capturing each instance of belittlement, financial overreach, and emotional manipulation. Screenshots of bank transfers she made without consultation, audio recordings of particularly demeaning interactions, legal in our state with single-party consent. Meanwhile, I secured a furnished apartment downtown through a discreet arrangement with the property manager, 3 months paid up front, no paper trail connecting to our shared address. The financial disentanglement required surgical precision. I gradually moved assets to protected accounts without triggering her suspicion, keeping just enough in joint accounts to maintain normalcy. My attorney confirmed this wasn't illegal. I wasn't hiding community property, just safeguarding my portion from impulsive female-empowered decisions. Throughout this preparation phase, my wife's behavior only intensified. The no male opinions rule expanded to absurd proportions. She interrupted me during phone calls with my parents, criticized how I loaded the dishwasher as typical male inefficiency, even questioned my driving routes as masculine stubbornness about directions. "We're having my empowerment group's monthly celebration here next Saturday," she informed me one evening. Not asked, informed. "I'll need you to handle the food again. Then make yourself scarce. The entire house will be a no-male zone." I clarified, "Exactly?" She nodded approvingly, mistaking my question for acceptance. "You're finally getting it." I smiled. "I am indeed." The invitation couldn't have been more perfect. A full evening where I was explicitly unwanted in my own home. The universe had delivered the ideal exit window. That week, I finalized my preparations. Essential documents were already secured off-site. I had opened new accounts at different banks. My new apartment was set up with basic necessities. The divorce papers were drafted and ready. Friday night, while she slept, I quietly packed a single suitcase with irreplaceable items, family photos, my grandfather's watch, personal mementos. The rest was just stuff, replaceable, unlike my dignity. Saturday morning arrived, and I moved through our house with strange calmness, memorizing details I'd likely never see again. The coffee maker I'd bought her for our second anniversary, the painting we'd found at a street fair in the early days, small artifacts from a relationship that once held promise. As instructed, I prepared an elaborate spread for her gathering: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, homemade desserts. A final demonstration of the value she was choosing to discard. "This looks acceptable," she noted, inspecting my work with the critical eye she developed for all my efforts. "Remember to be gone by 6. The women need space to speak freely." "Understood," I replied, meeting her eyes directly. Something in my gaze made her pause momentarily, but she quickly dismissed whatever doubt had surfaced. At 5:30, her friends began arriving. I greeted them politely, served drinks, then retreated upstairs to our bedroom. From the window, I watched more women arrive, their voices growing louder as their numbers increased. At precisely 6 o'clock, I picked up my pre-packed suitcase from its hiding place in the guest room closet. On her bed, I placed 3 items: my house key, a sealed envelope containing a detailed letter explaining exactly why I was leaving, and the business card of my divorce attorney. I took nothing that could be contested in the division of assets. This wasn't about money, it was about reclaiming respect. The women's laughter echoed through the house as I quietly descended the back stairs, walked through the garage and placed my suitcase in my car, which I'd parked down the street that morning. No dramatic confrontation, no heated final words, just the decisive action of a man who knew his worth and the precise moment to demonstrate it. Driving away from the house that evening felt like emerging from underwater after nearly drowning. Each mile increased the oxygen in my lungs. By the time I reached my new apartment, I could finally breathe fully again. My phone remained off. Whatever chaos was unfolding back at the house would happen without my witness or participation. The women would feast on the food I prepared, celebrate their solidarity, and eventually notice my absence. They'll probably nod until someone needed a drink refilled or dishes cleared. The new apartment was sparse but functional. I sat on the unfamiliar couch, experiencing a strange mixture of liberation and grief. Not grief for the relationship that had been mourned gradually over months of disrespect. This was grief for the life I'd built and the future I'd planned within it. At midnight, curiosity finally won. I turned on my phone to find 37 missed calls and 29 text messages. Their tone evolved from irritation to confusion to panic. "Where are you? The kitchen's a mess. Are you seriously hiding to make some point? This is childish. Come home now. Hello. This isn't funny anymore. I checked the garage. Your luggage is gone. What's happening? Answer your phone. Please, just tell me you're okay. I found your key in the letter. Call me right now. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. I've called everyone. Nobody knows where you are. This is not how adults handle problems." The final message came just 20 minutes earlier. "I'm calling the police if you don't respond." I sent a single text. "I'm safe. Do not file a missing persons report. This is my decision. The letter explains everything. Please respect my space." Then I turned off my phone again and slept more peacefully than I had in months. The next morning, I activated a new phone with a number known only to my lawyer, my parents, and my closest friend, who'd helped me move essential items to storage weeks earlier. Through my friend, I learned my wife had indeed called the police, only to be told that adults are allowed to leave their homes voluntarily. They wouldn't treat it as a missing persons case, especially since I confirmed my safety. Her subsequent meltdown was apparently spectacular. Several guests remained late into the night, strategizing responses to what they termed my emotional abuse through abandonment. The irony was magnificent. Enforcing a house rule that literally silenced and excluded me was considered empowerment. My quiet departure from that environment was labeled abuse. My letter had been explicit about the separation being a direct consequence of the no male opinions rule and the disrespect it represented. It listed specific instances, dates, and witnesses. It explained how systematically devaluing someone based on their gender was the textbook definition of sexism, regardless which direction it flowed. I'd left contact information for my attorney and clear instructions. I would only communicate through legal channels until she acknowledged the fundamental breakdown in respect that had occurred. According to my friend, she was spinning an entirely different narrative to our social circle, painting herself as the shocked victim of a husband's midlife crisis or mental breakdown. 3 days into my self-imposed silence, the first legal communication arrived. Not divorce papers from her side, those would come later, but a laughably transparent demand for access to all financial accounts, claiming concern about marital assets being hidden. My attorney responded with documentation of her pattern of unilateral financial decisions, including the phantom European vacation, unauthorized transfers from our savings, and excessive spending without consultation. The message was clear. I had receipts, literal and figurative. 1 week after my departure, a mutual friend reached out through my parents' number, offering to mediate. "She's really struggling," he said. "She admits she might have taken things too far with that house rule." "Might have," I repeated. He sighed. "Look, she's not good at apologies. She misses you. The house feels empty. She'll change." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but not because she understands what went wrong. Only because her actions had consequences she didn't anticipate." "So that's it? Years of marriage over a temporary phase?" "This wasn't a phase," I corrected him. "This was a deliberate choice to transform our relationship from partnership to dictatorship. And dictators don't suddenly develop respect for opposing voices until those voices demonstrate their power." He had no response to that. Some truths are unanswerable. 2 weeks into the separation, the facade finally cracked. My wife's carefully constructed narrative of being the victim began collapsing under the weight of reality. Without me at home to absorb her directives, manage household affairs, and provide the emotional and financial support she'd taken for granted. Her enlightened new lifestyle proved unsustainable. News traveled through her social network. She'd had a complete meltdown during her empowerment group meeting. According to reports, she'd suddenly interrupted another woman's story about reclaiming domestic space to ask, "But what happens when he actually leaves that space?" Apparently, the group had no prepared script for this scenario. Their philosophy centered around controlling men who stayed, not responding to men who walked away with dignity. On day 17, she broke protocol and emailed me directly rather than going through attorneys. The message oscillated wildly between accusation and pleading. "I can't believe you'd throw away everything we built over something so trivial as a house rule." This extreme reaction proves everything my group said about fragile male ego. But I'm willing to discuss modifying some aspects of the rule if you stop this childish silent treatment. The mortgage is due next week. The yard needs work. The house feels wrong without you. I didn't respond. 3 days later, another email arrived. This one eerily reminiscent of the relationship we once had. "I miss your laugh. The way you'd bring me coffee in the morning. How you always knew when I needed space or closeness without me saying it. Please come home so we can talk. I promise to listen." The final line revealed everything. "I promise to listen." As if my speaking was a privilege she could grant or withdraw at will. As if the baseline of human respect was hers to bestow, rather than the minimum requirement for any relationship. I forwarded it to my attorney without comment. By week 4, mutual friends reported a significant shift. The empowerment group had stopped meeting at our house. Several members had distanced themselves from my wife as her version of events unraveled. The more perceptive women in the group recognized the dangerous precedent. If disrespecting your partner could lead to abandonment regardless of gender, their own relationships might be at risk. Her sister called my parents seeking to establish back-channel communication. "She's a mess," she reported, crying constantly, barely functioning. She admits she went too far with all this gender role reversal stuff. "That's not what happened," I told my mother to relay back. "This wasn't role reversal. This was fundamental disrespect presented as enlightenment." On the 1-month anniversary of my departure, legal documents arrived confirming what I'd suspected. My wife was systematically draining our joint accounts. My attorney immediately filed for emergency financial orders to freeze remaining assets pending divorce proceedings. The judge, a woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair and zero tolerance for games, saw through the manipulation immediately. "The court doesn't recognize gender-based double standards," she noted dryly. "Financial control tactics are problematic regardless who employs them." It was the first hearing where we were physically in the same room. My wife alternated between glaring at me and attempting sorrowful, pleading looks. I maintained neutral eye contact when necessary and focused on the judge when speaking. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about consistently demonstrating the respect I expected but never received. Outside the courtroom, she attempted to approach me directly. My attorney stepped between us, but I gestured that it was okay. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said, voice breaking. "We could have worked through this. You didn't have to leave. You created and enforced a rule explicitly silencing me in our home," I replied calmly. "When people show you who they are, believe them. It was just a stupid rule. I didn't think you'd take it so seriously." "That's the problem. You didn't think my self-respect was serious. You assumed I'd tolerate any level of disrespect to maintain our relationship. That miscalculation had consequences." Her face hardened. "So, this is punishment." I shook my head. "No, this is the natural result of systematically dismantling the foundation of our marriage. Respect isn't negotiable." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "This whole silent exit thing, it's so cold, so calculated." I paused, looking back. "Actually, it's exactly what you wanted. A house with no male opinions. I just expanded the boundary to include my entire life." 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. I occasionally hear updates about her through mutual connections. She stopped attending the empowerment group, started therapy instead. Recently told a friend she's re-examining some toxic influences that damaged her marriage. Perhaps someday she'll truly understand that equality means equal respect, not transferring disrespect from one gender to another. Perhaps she'll build a healthier relationship with someone new, one based on mutual value rather than power dynamics. As for me, the silence that began as a tactical exit has evolved into peaceful independence. In the end, I didn't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the sound of a door quietly closing behind you. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.